Ayin Beis, Volume 1. We're in the middle of Discourse 26. Chapter Kuf 100. After explaining in the previous discourse how spheres from the word telling the story reveals machshavas hanalamis, the hidden thoughts, which in one word means the hidden spheres and all their dimensions. Essentially, the hidden story behind the structure of existence. Now, in this mayvin, chapter 99 begins Levadzes. The 10 spheres reveal the root and source. Besides the root and source of the hidden thoughts, the 10 spheres of atzilus reveal Ein Sof HaBligvul, the infinite, meaning beyond the structure. And he explains at length this is the meaning of Shamayim Mesaprim Kvoid Keil. So remember, Shamayim Mesaprim Kvoid Keil is the expression the heavens relate the story of God's beauty or the glory is exactly quoted in Rabbi Shem Tov. And everything here is a diuk, is emphasizing the precision of the language used by the Pardes, as he cites Rabbi Shem Tov. That just like Shamayim Mesaprim, just like dibur, speech and writing in a letter, explained through their definitions, that we should sense the hidden thoughts of the wise person. The same thing, heaven reflects on the divine. So here he explains how Shemayim Mesaprim Kvoid Keil, when you look into heaven, Su Marim Enechem, you actually see and you can recognize a power that's beyond finite. Because a finite creature on its own, the rule of nature would be, could not go on forever, has to change, has to be subject to the laws of nature, which means change, erosion, weakness, and so on. And we see in the heavenly celestial bodies, we see, number one, their consistent existence, that they don't die. Number two, their consistent and perpetual motion. And number three, their coordination. That even though each is in its own orbit and its own reality, there's a coordination and synchronization between all of them. So all this testifies to Hakeach Ein Sof, that's beyond them, that's dictating and directing the show, a choreographer. And explain, this is what the Medrash Tillim says on the Pasuk HaShamayim Mesaprim, when it brings the example, how do you see the strength of a strong what demonstrates strength? It's like the stone. And the word is mizgoishish. Mizgoishish means, using from the aruch, it's where the bottom, you could say the ground of a ship touches the ground of earth, the shore. So when a ship comes to shore, we say the bottom of the ship has touched the bottom of the earth, which is, he's saying that heaven, being precise in the example, touches earth by telling us, giving on earth a taste of this divine infinite power and of the unity of God, Echad, and how all these celestial bodies are all bottled and subjugated to the divine direction. And then he adds finally the Medrash Hinni Mamtir, that to explain further, Avna Hudim Mizgeishis, what is this thing that heaven does? So he says, from heaven we see that all the hashpos, all the transmissions come, both the negative, justice, which was the fire and the sulfur that destroyed Sdom, and also the positive, dew and man, also come from heaven. How is that possible that one place should be a channel for different opposite transmissions? That also demonstrates the scholars, this interconnectivity comes from something that's Tiferes, which is more powerful and has the ability to combine and fuse two different forces. Bottom line from all this is that Hashemayim Mesaprim, when you look at Shemayim, it testifies and demonstrates for us a Keich Ein Sof, Keich HaBligvul, the power of the Bligvul. So I just wanted to answer a seeming question. If you go back to chapter 87, where we also discussed the nitzchis of Tzvar Shamayim, we also discussed the eternity, perpetuation of the celestial bodies. But there, he spoke about it in the context of Sefirah from the word number. If you remember, Ayin Beis, right? This used the same ideas. And there he also said that what does number show? Number shows value. And value, you see it in each one of the celestial bodies, that each one, the Kayom and Beish, each one demonstrates value. So there he was speaking about it in spheres as a number that reflect that. And here he's speaking about it in context of spheres as it's telling a story. So the question is there a distinction between the two? Seemingly the same idea. So I was thinking about it. In other words, you could ask the question this way: what is Hashemayim Mesaprim? How the heavens relate the story different than Mayna Misper Litzvam, how the number, which reflects the value of each of the tzvam, or each of the kechavim, Mayna kechavim, as he said there, where there he's talking about the quality of counting and so on. So I think, if you think about it, it's actually a very beautiful distinction. Because there, if you remember, he spoke about number has two sides to it. There's a number of Elam Hazeh from Shalah. There's a number where it's only focusing on quantity. You see a lot of stars in the sky. You don't necessarily immediately appreciate the quality. When you think about it, you know, Ishlay Neder, that the fact that each of them stands and is strong and all this thing, teaches you that number really is also quality. As we learned then, that the goal is to appreciate in quantity quality. So there the focus really is that in the material world, you should recognize the divine power of quality, each being the kiyum, the perpetuation of each celestial body. Here, it's actually not talking about that the earth, the number should recognize that which is beyond number, so to speak, the quantity. Here is a higher level. The heavens tell a story. There it doesn't say tell a story. It says the number, if you think about it, number means value. Here the heavens actually tell a story. So it's more than just a number, and then the individual star, each individual planet, or each individual celestial body tells, gives us, shows us its value. Here the heavens tell a story of Ein Sof, of Bli Gvul. So there it's true that the focus there is also that you have to say there's a higher power, but the focus is more on the value of each entity. And here the story is much more about Ein Sof Bli Gvul. So the story of Misper Sefirahs that tell the story is a deeper dimension than Sefirah as it's telling the number. That's when you compare, because it was very obvious that he actually refers back there. So just helpful to understand that, in other words, we're talking about different levels of appreciation of the divine as we climb the ladder here. And with that said, so we continue on. So all this was Hashemayim Mesaprim, all this to explain that the atzilus, Sefirahs, reveal the Bli Gvul. That's what he continues now, chapter 100, Kuf, page Kuf Tzad Gimel 193, to say, okay, so now we said Hashemayim Mesaprim, now he's going to go back to atzilus now. This was like an example essentially. It's not an example, but it's it's usually Hashemayim Mesaprim, but it's talking about it more in terms of what we can experience. Meaning Shamayim Tachtenim means the heavens that we see. Now he's going to Shamayim Al Yenim, I guess, which means, in other words, the root of it in atzilus. And similarly, we'll understand the 10 spheres of atzilus. Shehem Mesaprim U'Megalim is B'chinas Eid and Seif Bli Gvul, that they relate and they reveal the infinite divine light of Bli Gvul. That's beyond finite. So like we said, Shemayim Mesaprim, we see something. In other words, the 10 spheres don't just reveal that they have a source in the Kayach HaMaskil, in the core faculty, or in the hidden faculty, or in the core faculty, which is still the source. That we say that the structure is rooted in the unconscious or the unconscious, as we learned. Now we're saying that it's teaching us something beyond. It's like basically teaching us about Etzem HaNefesh. He doesn't say that exactly, but it's like teaching us about Bli Gvul. Because even though the unconscious, as he said, and the unconscious are not yet chochma, wisdom, but it's still chochma stima. It's still, you're going from wisdom, you're coming to understand beyond, and there's a revelation, as he said, even from the Etzem HaKom. When the student challenges the teacher, or the student, the questions and so on, it's at the end of the day, it's a revelation in the level called wisdom, intelligence. Now he's talking about how the Sefirahs reveal Bli Gvul, a type of infinite power that's beyond any structure.
But Shemayim, we actually can see it. We can see it and
yeah.
infer from it that there's the Bli Gvul.
Yeah.
But atzilus even necessary is atzilus. We don't see that.
There's a whole pedic we're going to learn now. Not that we don't see it, but we learn from this that's what their role is. Remember, the fact without atzilus we wouldn't have any knowledge of anything. The fact that we know, that is atzilus working. So you may not see it, but that's what it's called. Now he's telling us atzilus. In other words, the fact that we remember he spoke about that from Shabbos alone, creation alone, we can't defend. Don't forget about the word atzilus. Atzilus is not a planet.
Am I accepting that?
No. You're calling whatever that awareness is, call that atzilus. That's all. Like you said, we know from the Shabbos itself. He says that knowing itself is atzilus. Atzilus is not. That's cut out from the word. We think it's like a planet.
Yeah.
So it's not a planet. Atzilus is a force. That's really what it is.
A certain state of consciousness?
Yeah. You could say it's definitely a certain state of consciousness. In Ishtalshelus, it's a force. It's essentially a force put into the system. It would be like you have a body and you have a brain. You could say, relatively speaking, the mind is the atzilus within a human being itself. Atzilus is the mind. Midas is, let's say, the heart. And action is asiyah.
Midas is Binah.
Now, obviously, your mind can be controlled by asiyah, where you think only about gashmistic things all day. But if you use your mind to go beyond, yes, it's essentially atzilus working through us. That would be like neshomo shenesata b'taheri ata baros ata yitzata. We have the tahera of the neshomo working. It's actually beautiful because it means even without Aveda you have it. Just when you contemplate on God, that alone is already atzilus. Obviously, a neshomo atzilus has it full blown, and you live your life that way. Remember, the knowing that God exists and understanding God does not suddenly change your life, because atzilus does not transform you.
Yeah, but when a Gentile professor studies about God,
absolutely,
he's experiencing atzilus.
To some extent, yeah, for sure. Based on that, for sure, there would be no awareness. We'd basically be animals or a stone. A stone exists; it's a creation, but it doesn't have awareness. It's exactly right. That's why I said, if you remember many times, the first introduction teaching Chassidus, if we were like a clean slate, would be get beyond time and space as we understand. It's not planets, and we're not talking about yesterday and tomorrow. We're talking about realities that exist right now, and their deeper dimensions. It would be like someone saying, "What does your DNA look like?" Or what is the forces that shape you look like before they've been affected by society or by parents or whatever. And that's really what Chassidus is. It's trying to give you a picture of yourself as you are, like without all the wrappers and all the distortions. That's how I would put it. That's why I said atzilus is the purest us. That's maybe the word tahir. The purest version of you is atzilus. Now, obviously, there's also you, how you're working, day to day. It also defined. We ultimately are defined by our actions, not just by our spirits.
But that's the way atzilus comes on everything.
That's why it has all the layers, the levushim, exactly. And neshomo of atzilus is shining right through him. When you see him, you see atzilus. That's why they said Alter Rebbe fell asleep. You saw atzilus at work. There was no what's it called, interference, no turbulence. It's like a direct reception.
No resistance.
Exactly. Look, the Alter Rebbe knew from the tzirufim what time of day it was. What does that mean? It means a person who is not blocked by the surface of Elam Hazah, the material world. His energy flows. So now he's saying al derech zeh atzilus. So he's going to explain now. Because now we say, given to our hearts Binah, lahavin. Binah lahavin. Binah means understanding, to understand, to discern.
Knowledge to understand.
Dainu lahavin dovor meter dovor. What does that mean? To understand one thing from another, to infer one thing from another. You remember this expression was used in chapter 98. And interestingly, the source of it is the same Gemara Chagigah, by the way, the same sugya of mayvin, chochma, mayvin medaite. So in other words, it's about understanding things from something else. So what did he say? Mayvin dovor meter dovor. It was on top there somewhere. What did I say? Tzadik Ches? I think Tzadik Zayin maybe. No, Tzadik Zayin, I'm sorry. 97. Actually, there I think he brought it in a different way. Or am I wrong? Do you see it? It's one of those two pages. I remember it's on the left side. Okay. Yeah, it was a paid Tzadik Zayin. We were speaking, there was Fakez, he was speaking on a lower level. He was saying, not Etzem Kecha Chochma, he says the idea, there's that theory of the idea and how it breaks into details. So dovor, maybe dovor, metech dovor, is two different things, right here. Tzadik Zayin, like the 7, 8, 10 lines from the beginning of the chapter. See, it starts metech dovor, a line that starts metech dovor. But nevertheless, they come from one root. So I just compared. I don't know if I think this is on a higher level he's discussing here. Just a second. So he says like this, that the hine inyan habina hu b'chinas tfisa sa'er sheba b'chinas islapshus dafka, because now Binah, what's its inyan? What is Binah? As opposed to, let's say, chochma. Chochma is a spark of an idea. You don't really, it's not yet contained, it's not yet grasped thoroughly. Binah is tfisa sa'er. You're already holding on to. You have a handle, you have something they're holding on, the energy. It comes specifically in a form of, slapshus means enclosed. It's not already manifest in some way. So that's Binah and atzilus. What's Binah benefesh? Like in a human being, in the soul, the spirit. It means to comprehend, not just to initiate, not just an idea, but it's already a comprehension of every every intellectual idea. That comes in a form of being grasped in the containers of his mind. Not like the spark or the point of chochma, of a concept that's not yet graspable. Even though he knows in general the idea, so when a person has an idea comes to your mind, obviously he has some awareness. That's what means chochma. But you can't say that he really has a handle on it. It's still in the form of makif, meaning not internalized. It like hovers, it schwebt, hovers on his mind, meaning v'yadeya rak klolos inyan levad. It's like you get an idea, you just know the general idea, but you have not developed it, so you don't really have a handle and a internalization, a grasp of it. But in the mayach of Binah, second mayach, the brain of the intellect, the Binah, the power of Binah, the idea comes in tfisa mamash, literally that he grasps it. That he knows and understands and appreciates and comprehends this idea well. How and ma and what. So, for example, a chochma would be idea. You wouldn't know the what, the how, and the what. You'd know the general thing, but the details and the whole breakdown would not be there. So, like it's being a benefesh, just like it is in our process of understanding, the same thing is the Binah Lamaila, meaning the spiritual version of it in atzilus. Its role is that it grasps the energy in a container, specifically, that you know and comprehend. Shiyadua umusik. Yeah. That's known and understandable, right. Not Shiyadei Mask, I'm sorry. Shiyadua umusik. In other words, remember, in atzilus, you're not dealing with an individual that's trying to understand. You're talking about energy flow. So chochma is a spark of an idea. It's only a muscle, really, at the end of the day. Our chochma and binah is, as I said many times, a muscle is itself the same level, just manifest. But in atzilus, was basically, we're talking about chochma is a point, and binah is essentially containing that point, a container.
We're developing that point.
Yeah.
It's almost like the old-fashioned tubes in the radios. A little thing would come in, and then it would be reflected on a plate with a high voltage, and that would cause the little thing to modulate the big current. It's very similar concept.
And this is what it means when we say Shem Havaya Binah, is with the punctuation of Elokim. When you write Havaya, sometimes you pronounce it Elokim, even though it's the same letters. The same thing with Adnai. So of course, Kabbalah talks about this many times like this. Just before we continue, just to explain just a small introduction, which we've discussed in other places when we spoke many chapters back about letters. Remember, letters in Hebrew have they're basically energies. It's a flow of energy. It's like the screen, a projector projects white light, and the screen are the letters. So the shape of the letters, the number of the letters, the meaning of the letters, everything about letters is some form of transmission. Eshis Hashem, like we spoke about a name. A name is basically an interface between the soul and the body. That's why we say a person's name, for Mishaberach, or blessing, why do you say their name? Because the name is how the neshomo channels into them. So you say their name and their mother's name, or by an aliyah, etc., etc. So names have, number one, they have the letters. There's the actual letters. But besides the letters, there's also the punctuation. In Torah, there's no punctuation. Everything is written in Sefer Torah, you only have letters. You memorize the punctuation. So we have atzilus, time in the Tansa. You have time in the Kudus, atzilus, Tagin. There's four things in the letters. There's the letters themselves, the shape of the letters. There's Nukudis, that's the punctuation. There's Taimim, which is like the trop, how you sing it. And then there's Tagin, is the crowns. So it's Tansa, it's called Tansa. The Baal Shem Tov says, when we learn about Bikurim, Samta B'Tena, you should take the fruit and put it into a basket. Tena is Taimim Nukudis atzilus. So there's only the time without the Tagin. Tagin is the crown. It's usually so. Tansos usually shows that each letter has in it all kinds of dimensions. So when you say that a letter like Shem Havaya has a different nikud, sometimes Havaya is pronounced the way we don't pronounce it, Yud Kevovke, or we don't even know how to pronounce it. The Shem Meferish. Sometimes Adnai, sometimes Elokim.
Or sometimes there's a shwa under the Yud and the Chayim and the Hey.
Right. Yeah. So when you say a letter, the same word, but it's in a different nikud, you're really saying it's essentially that energy, but it's coming through the garments of Elokim. So that's what he's saying. Shem Havaya, the Binah hu b'nikud Elokim. Shem Havaya exists in every dimension. Because it's always Yud Kei Vav Kei, four things in every transmission. But generally, Yud is chochma, Hey is Binah, Vav is Zah, the Midas, and Hey is Malchus. We discussed this also earlier. Even in the higher levels, he spoke in the Kudus of Akav, Ak, and so on. But in each sphere, there's also Havaya. So what's the Havaya and Binah? Havaya and Binah is Nikud Elokim. Because already now, Binah, remembers also the left side, it's like Gvura. It's the Gvura within Meichin, The Hainu, what does that mean? The Hainu B'chinas HaKelim, that's the level of containers. So Elokim is already referring to containers. We learned this earlier as well, that Elokim reflects on the containers. So, we don't mean actual container. Remember, we spoke of the dominant containers. The primary containers are Malchus. But relative to Chochma, Binah is already a container in the intellectual level. Because it's taken a point and it's developed and it's graspable. It contains an idea. Like it says elsewhere. And this is why Binah is the level of neshomo. I guess it means Chai Yechid and Neshama, like that. We'll see in a minute. Huh? Yeah, I guess that's what he means. And Neshama is that, because Chai Yechid, okay. So like it says, Kumeshikosov, Nishma Shaddai Tevinom, Dahin Bechinas Gili Pnumi. Is that Tehillim? Nishma Shaddai Tevinom. Okay. Nishma Shaddai Tevinom means the soul of the Shadaim, of the breast, I guess. Huh? What do you think? Yeah, I think so. Tevinom. We'll understand. So you see, neshama connected to Binah. The Hainu B'chinas Gili Er Pnimi. So since it's in Kalim, it's in the form of a Gili Er Pnimi. It's internalized. The Kashem Shanashama Malas Aguv, just like the soul. Fills the body, B'chinas Yislapshus B'Gili Mamish, in a enclosed and virtually and literally revealed, to the point that we can understand, to know and appreciate our faculties. It's not a mystery. You see a human being that's alive, you don't need you appreciate it. You see a soul that's active. It's not based on Amunah. You see an active soul that's revealed. Something makif would not be that obvious. You're looking for the concordancia? There's a big one. It's a big one, right near the Shulchan Aruch. Right in front of you. Like we said, learned earlier, chapter 98, being Yediyas HaMetziyus v'Asagas HaMehus. In the knowing of existence and understanding and appreciating its personality. So what did we learn there? Which was this Tzadik Chassi said, right? He said about the Kriyach HaMaskil. So even though we may not understand its mehus, but we know it exists. We clearly know it exists. So that means that it's like filling up. It's like a pnimi. The same thing, Binah, which is the level of the soul of neshama, is also a comprehension that's the tfisa mamish that you actually is graspable. So it grasps the energy. Then he continues another parenthesis. And Binah is greater than the comprehension and of the faculties of the soul below. Because they don't really appreciate and comprehend the mehus, the personality of the soul, like we learned earlier. We only know that it exists. You could say a soul is in us. There's an energy flow. But you cannot say that we understand its inner personality. But Binah above is that the actual personality of the energy and its reflection are understood, are comprehended. You're looking for Tanakh? Right above the Shulchan Aruch. Okay. Like for example, the comprehension of souls in Gan Eden, paradise, that enjoy and take pleasure in the reflection of the Shechina that rests, the divine presence there, literally in a form of appreciating the personality itself, like it says elsewhere.
It's an
Eve, that's right. Now I remember. I was just going to say.
Yeah, Eve 32:8.
Eve 32:8 is Nishmas.
How do you say that? What's the pasuk?
Tevinam, yeah. Tevinam. But Shadeh is what we said, Shidayim? Rashi.
Rashi doesn't say anything. It just says Achi Lochi Danu Shachachma V'Leil Dayomim Zikna Neroch HaMakim.
Okay. Okay, so Binah, bottom line is so far that he's established, he's been elaborating that Binah.
David says, Nishmas and neshomo, Abba Mishadai, he and mayvin is Kulam, Kinar Kizah.
Abba Mishadai as an Eibishter Shadai? Okay, we got to look it up more detail. Fine. So Binah is more than just to say. He gave an example. The fact that the soul that we recognize as soul inside the body is still only knowing that it's there. Binah actually has also a mehus. So it's even more. That's what he qualifies in this parentheses. And what is the? So he gave explanation, a little explanation in Binah. It's all coming to understand how the spheres reveal the gvul, which we'll soon see. And the inyan of to understand something from another thing to derive. Right? That one thing is derived from another, a derivation. Right? Derivations. Derivatives, derivations. Love and dovor meter dovor. Who the mahasoga zeis boli de hasoga acheres. Hahofchis mahasoga kedemas. Hahofchis. That from this comprehension, now that chochma has come into Binah, so you have already comprehension, and it's in containers pnimi, and you sense it. You come from this to another comprehension that can even be opposite from the original, from the preceding one. It doesn't have to be opposite, but it could be. V'hainu d'shemezeh boli de hasoga shebehechach lemishiach dovor habilti musug. Wow, this is interesting. He's saying, why does he have to say that way? Okay, mayvin dovor meter dovor. Let's just explain what that means, and maybe that's basically means. I mean, it's a big part of all logic and all systems. Is that you hear an idea, you learn about an idea, and then it brings you to another idea. It's a common practice. It's common everywhere. And I mean, every rule has that. You have a general rule. You have ovas malachas, and you have the Toldos, and then you have and it can keep on going. Just as an example, so you have a general idea. Same thing conceptually. You can have a general concept. That's what we learned also before. Remember we spoke about the Ragachev. You could have the theory of an idea, and that theory brings you to many others. So let's for argument's sake say the initial idea you didn't conceive of, but someone told it to you, and then that brought you to many, many other ideas. It's basically saying, Chassidus does say this, now that I recall, that mayvin dovor meter dovor is telling you that there's something that you, in this dovor, when you know it, you could right away be aware there's a lot more than what meets the eye. And the proof is that people can derive from one thing to the next. But if you think about it deeper, mayvin dovor meter dovor is you're really not just figuring out other things on the same level. One idea is bringing you to deeper ideas. That's the real chiddush of mayvin dovor meter dovor. Like even when you say it as a euphemism, you say it as an expression, they say, v'day lemevin. You say, I told you, and mayvin dovor meter dovor, you already understand what I mean. It's like a little what he said before about mayvin medaite. In other words, it's a type of deeper knowledge. So dovor is telling you that there's a lot more here than that you have not yet reach. That's what he's saying here. In other words, it's like a type of understanding. The understanding gives you enough understanding. A person that doesn't have the dovor doesn't understand the teich dovor.
So you're saying that
A person that does have it understands there's a lot more here that's not understood. It's not necessarily inferred in the way you say dovor teich dovor, but when you think deeper into the meaning of it, yeah.
is that exactly what Binah is from the chochma? I mean, that's the way it works?
No, Binah contains the idea of chochma, but Binah has in it within itself dovor meteich dovor, mayvin dovor meteich dovor. Binah has two stages. You comprehend an idea, and not just a general point, and then that comprehension brings you to other. That's why it says the same Binah lahavin. Given to our hearts, Binah lahavin. In other words, not just to know, understand, but to also understand what needs to be, the things that come from the initial understanding, basically. It could stop. You could just say, I've been, and that's it. Here's a process that continues to go on and on and on. Let's see where he's going with this. Elsewhere it explains, and elsewhere it says, that what is the meaning of inferring from one idea to another, that if it comes from this comprehension, it comes to a completely different one, that has l'cheira, seemingly, no connection, relationship with the first inyan, which is, in other words, he's basically explaining how dovor b'teich dovor is not just a sequential and progressive process. It's not just, okay, I understand that, like when they say, tell me an orange is round, and the orange is color orange, so if you find something else, is that something else that's round, is it the color orange? That's more of a type of logical sequence. He's going that dovor is taking you to places that are far beyond the original context. Nevertheless, even though it's taking you to a thing that ostensibly has no relationship, has no connection to the original idea, it's still considered in the category of mayvin dovor meteich dovor. It's not like you jumped a leap of amunah, a leap of faith. You're understanding it. Because from his comprehension, he came to understand that there's something's not comprehensible. In other words, if you understand something very well, let's take for example, they say in 1898, the patent officer, the U.S. patent officer, they say, some say it's a legend, some say it's an urban legend. Yeah, he said he quit, he resigned, because he says whatever could be invented has been invented. This is 1898. So a lot was invented then. Electricity, you had the steam engine, you had a lot of science and so on. It just was a little premature, because you didn't yet have the atomic age, and Einstein, and subatomic quantum mechanics, nuclear, etc., computer age. Today no one's going to say that. We know a lot more than we did 100 years ago, because today we have more Havana. The more you know how much there is to know. So you need a mayvin to know. Like they say, there's those that don't know they don't know, then there's those that know that they don't know, and then there's knowing, and then there's not knowing that you know, and there's knowing that you don't know. Whatever, all the different levels. The point being here that mayvin dovor teich dovor is, but it's still called dovor meteich dovor, because you didn't come to it from an initial leap. You understood something. You understood it very well, and that led you to realize there's more to the picture than. And it's only because you understood it that led you to that place. The inyan mashasaga zeis hofchi masaga kedemes. But what about the fact that it's an opposite? So it's not like just flowing. Yeah. Hu kiasogi bilti musig hari hofchim zem. Kiasogi bilti musig hari hofchim zem. That's because comprehending and not comprehending are opposites. Comprehending means you understand it. Not comprehending means you don't understand it. So it's opposite from one another. And therefore, someone who has that sense of comprehension, he won't have something that is the opposite, the lack of understanding. Because all his whole inyan, a person who's a versteher, an understander, his whole inyan, his whole being, and his whole isaskus, his whole investment is in comprehending something. In other words, how the inyan is understood. Not that the thing is higher than comprehension. He's explaining why it's opposites. But then we're going to go to the second half, obviously. That means that whole inyan of all of his involvement, his entire involvement, what's his role? What's his mission? What's his thing? Is to find how it makes sense. He's trying to look for the thing that makes sense of it. He's not looking for the thing that doesn't make sense. Meaning how it's understood. So he looks at a situation. So there are people, let's say a child or someone who's ignorant or someone that doesn't have that type of skill. So he looks at something, it's a mystery. The whole idea of a Baal Masik, a person who's a comprehender, looks at something, he doesn't look at the mystery, he looks at how do we understand it and appreciate it. And to bring it into comprehension, not to find and say, the mystery in it. That's not his chush, that's not his instinct. Like you'll always find same situation, you'll find some people will analyze it, another person will say it's a mystery. And I'm not saying the person who says the mystery doesn't have any understanding, it's just that their chush is always in the mystique, is in saying how little we understand. And there's another person whose chush is saying how much we can understand.
That's a chochma.
He's calling a mayvin here, a Binah. He's calling Binah here. Yeah. One second. This is all coming to explain why it's an opposite, but then he's going to say it's still mayvin dovor, dovor. We'll get there. 1 second. That's not his instinct. It's an interesting analysis of a person. His job, in other words, wherever he goes, he looks to analyze, to understand, to appreciate. He's not discussing chochma here. He's discussing the Binah. Lies, chochma is a conceiver of ideas, by the way. It's nothing to do with this. This is an analyst.
Okay.
This is an ultimate analyst. Being that his chush, his sense, skill is in comprehending specifically. Valderech, he's still in the middle of this. He's still along. Valderech sheyesh mosnu masik v'charifu maksha. You have two types of people. Mosnu masik is more of a calm person who comes to deliberates and comes to a conclusion. V'charifu maksha is a sharp challenger, devil's advocate. Two different types of approaches. It's sometimes compared to Sinai and Eikad Harim. So Sinai is knowledge, is Bekiyas, is breath of knowledge. But Eikad Harim is breaking mountains. He's disrupting. It's a disruptive force. He's an Eikad means he breaks apart mountains, like he approves them or not crushes them. You know, when you attack it, you crack it, you splinter it, yeah. So Mosin literally means like Messinus. Messinus is more like patience, Messinus is tolerance. Masik is a person who comes to a maskana, like
maybe methodical.
Yeah, you could say in the broader term, yeah. Methodical, deliberate. Chorif is sharp, Maksha is a question. Ayin Beis chushim nivdalin. Remember when the Rebbe Rashab would say and write these memorim, he sometimes was referring to people who wrote to him and with these personalities. So that's why the elaboration is not just explaining, it's also, and remember it's Ayin Beis, so there's no limits in time and in pages. Anything can just go for pages until you get back, because so we can always get back to it. So all this is still in the so-called, not a question, but explanation, dovor, to understand something that's built in music. So why is it hafchi? She says because a person who comprehends, for him is the opposite of something that's lack of comprehension. Now he's explaining in personalities. Ayin Beis chushim nivdalin. These are two different separate senses, separate skills, you could say. The mosna masik, a person who's a mosna masik, that patient, deliberate, almost like the decision making. It's not so much the brainstorming and the challenging. Who Inyan, it's more than that. Mosna masik is like, you'll see in any situation, you'll see one person is constantly attacking ideas and challenging. And there's another person who's also reflective, far calmer, and so on. Who Inyan hayirida v'izgala shel hamuskel. That is the descent and the revelation of the muskel, of the idea. Belosh in Yiddish, gefinnen der Rechtkeit von dem Inyan, wie der Inyan ist recht. Oh boy, how do you translate that? To find the resonance. The rechkeit would be best as resonance. I mean, rechkeit means the correctness, the rightness, the integrity, but to see the truth in it, to recognize it's. He's looking for that resonating truth that it's right. The chodev maksha was lahailun lahastir. A chodev maksha is the opposite. It's to conceal and to hide, because he's challenging it. It's like kushis. It's like a kasha. Not that it doesn't bring a better result, but its approach is not, let's see what is the idea that we have here. It's faket. Let's challenge it and see what comes out of that. That's what a chodev maksha comes and says, what do you think you have I understand? Let me, he challenges it. It's sharp and challenges. So his focus is on how it's not understood. Which one are you?
Finding my way.
Okay. Like the Chassidim would say, I'm neither. I'm looking to become one. I'm a potential chodev maksha. Yeah, it's a question. It's a question on the table here. He's trying to say how David dovor, coming from comprehension to what's beyond comprehension, he asked a question. Isn't that opposite? And he's explaining now why it's opposite. Because a person who's an understander is the opposite of a person who's focuses on not understanding. He's middle still. Who's singing? Like it says elsewhere. Ayin Beis. The truth is, in a good venture, in business or in any type of thing, I find that for myself, but having these two combined together, good mashna is brilliant. Because you want someone like that, because you want to challenge it, because number one, you get out a far better result. Even if you come back to the original conclusion, I said this many times here, even in your own mind, if you have a clear about something, so one more time, you review it, challenge it completely. Like I say, 1 second. Let's go with it completely. Let's say I did exact opposite. How would it work? It's absolutely fine to do that. That's a healthy way of approaching things.
It's the entrepreneur and the technician, or the entrepreneur.
But then you don't just want a person who's constantly being devil's advocate. You want to come to so you need another type of person who looks and says, okay, we've argued it out. Now let's get to the. But there's some people who don't stop arguing even when you get there. So you need really another person is far more patient and says, okay, we heard everybody's thing. Now let's see what's the best of each, and then you want to challenge it again. But challenging is not just the shame to challenge. The point is to get clarity. It's just, someone who just wants to show you smart and is going to rip everything apart. I mean, you can do that endlessly.
So who's the third guy?
Who says there's a third? Maybe the Moshe Masik lets all the chodev makshas attack it, and then he comes and is like the judge, so to speak, or listens to it all and then reviews it. And if you're leading any effort, that's what you want. You want your team to argue it out. You like, let's say the chief of staff, the military. So there's the army, there's the navy, there's the air force. They all argue, we want today allocate most money to our department. So give me a case, make the case. So let's say today everything is air force because there's all this. This one will say everything is the navy. You hear it all and you argue about it and you come to say, let's find the balanced answer. You want to hear Shammai and he'll argue, because then you get the clarity of of the idea. I don't think it's not so much about a referee. Most of the masik is in general a person who's more. It takes it more patiently. He's more. A chodev maksha is going to make more mistakes also, because he's a challenger. He's not a clarifier. He's a challenger. So his thing is to challenge. You need it, but you don't. Maybe now he's the best decision maker.
See that in Gemara.
Right, because you need a guy like that. You want him to be on the.
Yeah, that's what sometimes people pull him, and it just doesn't lead anywhere.
Right. And common sense. Remember, there's also common sense. I'm not even getting into egos of arguing something. But let's go back here. She said, "Kamoy so Ayin Beis." So we see from this there are two different instincts, two different skills, two different senses. Really, is the word. Two different set of skill sets. Yeah, but chushim is more than a skill. It's not a kishin. Chush is like an innate ability or sense. Usually say it's a sense. Ability. The mishu masik ain't a chodev maksha. someone who's a Muslim master is not a B'charav HaMaksha. Someone who's that calm.
Did you read the sentence right after
Yeah, yeah. B'charav HaMaksha hu hayel mahastir ech shadayin ein einim. The B'charav HaMaksha, his idea is his whole thing is to conceal how it's not yet understood. To conceal. It's a concealing element because he's challenging the comprehension of it. He's not coming to conceal. His approach is a concealer. Instead of finding, like when one person comes, let's analyze it. Other person comes, let's slug it up. Ipchem is like the one when he comes up to heaven, and they say Dvar Teira. So he says, you say, and I'll tell you, I'll slug it up. I once had a guy more than once, but I had a guy like this at a table. It was unbelievable. People hear people talk, everything he had something else to say. And I finally decided that enough is enough. So I said to him, everyone was quiet. So I said, so tell us something. Share something. He mamish couldn't. His whole life is about. I embarrassed him a bit, but I wanted to because he was becoming obnoxious. Yeah, mamish everything. So I said, share something with us. He didn't even know where I was going. He said, so he said, no, you got it. So I said, no, I would love to hear what you have to say. You seem to be very knowledgeable. He was an insecure, brilliant guy who that's his whole life, is finding how everything else doesn't work. And I'm not saying that there's other problems there too, psychological. But my point is, there's sometimes be quiet and look at Lama Head was to Zog. Or sometimes even an argument, what you want to do is step back, not get so invested, and say, okay, I'll give you my approach. So what's the alternative? Say an alternative approach. And many people don't give an alternative. What they do is they just tell you yours is not good. Okay, so what's the alternative? Some will say, that's not my strength, I can't give alternatives, but I know this is not good. Fine. But I'm not saying that's to be critical of that type of individual, but the bottom line is you do need more than just what's not good. You need to know what is good. That's what he said. A person who's Charif HaMaksha is not looking to find the resonating truth, the elements that are he's looking the opposite. So it's chushim. So now let's go back to where he's up to. It's an example. This is all an example. Same thing as someone who has that ability or sense or instinct of hasaga, of comprehension. That's not his thing. It's not his role to find that which is not understood. His whole inyan is to find that which is comprehended. I remember once we had this debate, even here is about the Rebbe. So there's the Mishnah. What does the Mishnah say? That as a Talmud, Kol Inyan is to be Mekayim Divrei Harav. You know, when someone said to him, what was I think in Adius, you know what I'm talking about?
Say another word.
He says, someone came to slug up what his teacher said. She says, he's my teacher. My role is to understand what he said, not to try to upshlow him. There's a lush in the Chazal in it. Okay. But bottom line, you need both. And in general, his involvement is in things that are comprehensible, not in things that are beyond comprehension. It's like someone like we spoke about scientists. That's my role. There's their roles to try to comprehend. I'm talking about a healthy scientist. It's unbelievable elaboration just on this type of, and the whole inyan of his involvement is to comprehend the garments of comprehension, dafka specifically. And so, it seems like, it's definitely not redundant, but it seems like such a detailed breakdown. It should be in a form of tfisa, to grasp. I know why he wants to do this, because this is the interface between grasping and beyond grasping, because he's going to bring mayvin dovor, metech dovor. This is gvul. And from gvul you come to bli gvul. That's what he wants to do here. So he's making the case of the kelim very strong. You understand? Because the point is that the 10 spheres, actually, now that I think about it, I'm sure he's going to feel it. You remember the words of the Pardes? The words of the Pardes in chapter 91. What were his words? Shasfiris mesapris umagbilis as habilti mugbal. I think that's really where he's going to. You see? the magbil, the gvul, is revealing the bli gvul, the machshavas na'olam. Okay. It's unbelievable how he's explaining a piece of the Rabbeinu Shem Tov in the Paradise. It's amazing. Taking mamish, havana. That's mayvin dovor metayel dovor. That's I assume that's where he's going with this. Okay. Let's so with I'm saying that label yam saying the mamasuk. Ucholin sasuk is lahavin bilavush hasogel is begins tvisamav. Valkein hasogel hagesh dovor a built imuzing has a hofchim etzem. He's now concluding, and therefore the comprehension and the sensation that there's something that's not comprehensible is has a hofchim etzem achushale. That contradicts, it's antithetical and goes against the grain of his entire instinct. So a person whose whole life, his whole role, his whole instinct, his whole sense is to understand and to tell him that something is not understandable goes against his whole approach. Which is maybe why a Muslim Masjid is so irritated by a Charuf Amaksh. Because he's trying to understand, what do you keep trying to slug? It's like that type of and specifically, Shari Hasoga is a level state of yesh. It's a sense of being. I understand. Yesh, I sense myself. And something saying is beyond my comprehension is a form of bittul. So this only makes it more intense. How opposite? It's like yesh and ayin. Here I'm understanding. My whole thing is to understand and appreciate, and it's more. I own it, so to speak. And you're telling me no, I don't understand it, or it's not understandable. That's like chochma binah she'ayin v'yesh. Interestingly, yesh is the hasaga, and chochma is like the charif hamakshit, so to speak, like the ayin part. Just comparing the two. Yeah. Because this sensation that there's something not comprehensible affects a bitla kli. It subjugates, it sublimates. It affects a sublimation in the container of his mind and in his chushim and in his instincts. So therefore, from this we see they're opposites. The number one opposite because simply understanding and not understanding are opposites, and more because understanding is about owning, yesh. And this is about bittul, about that you don't get it, that is beyond you. We talked about this, the whole interface is this. That's why I think he's elaborating, because he's giving a good example in our lives. Because this we all have. When you're in the middle of learning something, you really understand it, and suddenly they tell you that you want to connect to God, there's something beyond understanding. It's almost what we said, Ratziv V'Shuv, is that tanzen, do I get it or don't I get it?
It's frustrating.
Oh yeah. And ultimately the art is the mastery, what I said, like the wave. To know that while you get it, there's something you don't get, and even when you don't get it, you can get it. It's lebedik, the kitzas. Yeah. And nevertheless, now he's coming back to the beginning of this one. Nevertheless, he comes to this. Yeah, this other understanding. In other words, as much as it's opposite, it's still mayvin dovor metayel dovor. One leads you to the next in a full comprehension. So it's like basically, it itself is leading you to the opposite of itself. Basically, now in truth, this is a primis binah, because you could argue, 1 second, maybe it doesn't lead you. So now he's going to explain that this is the true nature of binah. You say, in other words, not everybody has this. Maybe you could say a lot of people have mayvin metayel dovor up to the point that I'm a yesh, but not up to the point I don't get it. It's like mayvin metayel dovor as you bring the idea down, not that it brings you to a place that's beyond comprehension. So he says, but the truth is, this is primis binah specifically. The chitzein is binah hu lahasig ulitfis, because the outer dimension of binah is exactly what he's saying, is to comprehend and to grasp. V'asogad the chitzein is binah ba'er alaki kamay shaba begili sheshayach b'zet tfisa asogad. Remember that he's talking Binah Lamayla and Atzilus. He gave the example of Binah Lamata as Tfisa. But Binah of Atzilus obviously is basically saying Chitzeni's Binah's main role is to grasp. And that's it focuses on Eid Aliki the divine energy that comes in a revealed way, where it's possible to grasp and to comprehend. But now, however, after he grasps and appreciates and comprehends well this divine idea, he comes from this first dimension of comprehension to a inner comprehension, which comes from Primis Binah. The Ma'acher, Shezeh Inyan Bo Ba'Sogeh, because since this idea came into a comprehension, you have to say it's only a reflection alone. Because the essence of something is not confinable, it's not containable. It's not in the category of being enclosed and being grasped. Okay, now he's going the other way around. That tfisa, grasping is very good, but that immediately tells you you're not grasping the essence, because the thing that's essence always is unable to be fully contained. And because it came into, was enclosed and graspable, that's why it shows that it's only, that's why it indicates it's only a reflection.
Why is that called sonius?
Because it's comprehension part, it's not the...
Because usually, we said that when it comes down and the Kaylee grabs it, it's the penis, and the sonius is afterwards, what it does with that, pouring out the thing. So it seems like it's in the reverse order this time.
No, we're talking of the divine essence is beyond comprehension, beyond containers. We're talking about that now. He's not talking about its function on. We're talking about the divine essence is beyond comprehension and containers. So as soon as you have some comprehension, you're already talking about a reflection of it.
So it's a reflection, but it's not sonius. It's more sonius or panemius of what comes in, not the keli.
Yeah, we're not talking about the chitzenis of keli. We're talking about chitzenis Binah, that the outer dimension of Binah deals with the comprehension part. And then there's another part that brings you to understand there's something beyond that I comprehend. Basically on that level. He's not yet going into... So he's not talking about the root of the containers. He's just talking about simply how something's transmitted. That the first you comprehend, then you come to realize that there's more to it. A very basic level like that. And then there's the essence, the core, that's mufla. Remember we spoke before about seichla nelam, seichla mufla. That's beyond, that's wondrous, that's mufla removed, umuvdal, and removed and separate. And it's not comprehensible. The close because general energy that comes into comprehension is in general the general energy that comes into comprehension is infinitely distant compared to atzmus, the essence. Atzmus ha'er. Now here he's talking about atzmus ha'er, atzmus elokus also, atzmus. Yeah, whatever is beyond, yeah. Umashaboli de asoge, b'chinas primis binah. Tafke. Mashaboli de asoge zu, and that which comes to this comprehension is b'chinas primis binah tafke.
The comprehension of atzilus, of beyond, of not comprehending.
Yeah.
What would you say the Binah is not comprehensible?
No, the comprehension that it's not comprehensible. The dovor, the third dovor. Zogazu. This has soga. Yeah. Yeah. Him b'chinas primis binah the dafke the fishazel kama yitziyah mechushachet lechushachet ahofchi. Because that's like going away from one instinct or one sense, one ability to another. Remember we spoke that there's two different types of chushim. One is one that's busy and involved in understanding. Another one. So chetzeni is being is the understanding. To get to the point of beyond understanding, which is the etzem, that is the primis. Because the sense to understand of comprehension is to comprehend. We became mashabah in Yiddish. Goraruf. Oh wow. was a kum gararuf.
What's meant kum taruf?
Kum gararuf. It means that he's ascending. He's going high. Yeah.
In
Yeah.
chochma state, where it is.
Mayvin don't he's coming. Yeah. Listen. Mashaba. Lashon said kum gararuf.
It's going to be honest. No.
Okay.
What's al zeh?
Yeah, that's what we say.
Mashaba al zeh.
Mashaba al zeh.
Oh yeah, that's right.
Yeah, al zeh. Yeah. In other words, mashaba al zeh. Sheyesh masha bilti musik harizeh ischatzus hepech achus shalei. Basically, yeah, as kum gararuf. In other words, it's like in Yiddish, it's suddenly you're understanding something well, and you suddenly come to an epiphany. That's the gararuf, and a realization, awakening. Like that's it. It's like a havrake. That 1 second, I don't really get it. So it's really an elevation. You're going.
It's not the opposite. It's not just stupidity. Feeling of
Right, no, because you just it came from comprehension. Yeah, exactly. That's what he says, Mashabah. Because without the Yiddish, Mashabah is Ashesh Mashabilti, sounds very bland, very dry. You know, by Kum Gararuf, you realize it's an elevated state. But point being here, this is not about Amunah going out of your kelim. He's looking to go from Binah to deeper. That's what he's doing here. Because it's still Pnimis Binah, it's not chochma.
So the end process is that you really didn't completely succeed with Binah. That's the epiphany.
Meaning that comprehension, you come to from the comprehension that there's something here beyond comprehension, but it's not like someone who didn't go through the comprehension who just says, like, I don't understand. Like, I don't know of a fool is not that I don't know of a wise person.
Right.
It's a whole different reality. One is at the end of knowledge, one is at the end of understanding, one is at the beginning. That's the key thing here. That's the whole point of the interface. Because at the end of the day, it's going to be how we, with our kelim and our containers, come to with that which is beyond container.
how Binah can show beyond.
That's exactly correct.
It shows beyond.
That's why he made this whole case. That first of all, he wanted to establish it's an opposite, but that opposite comes from the original point. It itself is telling you that I'm not enough. That's what it comes down to.
That's the story. That's the sequel.
That's the deeper story. Yeah. Well, I mean, he didn't firace yet. Let's see how he takes it. I mean, it's a little, when you read this chapter, it's a little surprising. You'd think it would be a lot more similar to the last chapter about revealing Blig Vul in creation. But he's doing it through Binah. Okay. Binah is now the focus of our attention here. That's a schachus. It's something new. In other words, it's not Gilei Helam, bottom line. Because it's opposite of his nature, opposite of his natural inclination. Ubeyeser, and even more, and moreover, Shariasogahu inyan hayeshus u'metziyus dovor. Goes back to what he said before. Comprehension is yeshus u'metziyus dovor. When you comprehend, it's owning it. It's about you, me. I understand. And about metziyus dovor, you're tefes makom here. You exist. You are a versteher. You know, I'm an understander here. I'm a comprehender. Now he's elaborating more. Because besides that a comprehension itself fundamentally is a form of yesh, because comprehension means, I understand. The thing you understand is also must be something substantial, because how do you understand something that's not defined? So in other words, both the gavra is a yesh and the chefz is a yesh. The person that's understanding, the process of understanding, and the thing you're understanding. Because if it's understandable and comprehensible, you have to say it's a yesh. Right? In some form of shape. If you're going to be able to contain it, it has to have some shape. Very interesting. Form, a handle, right. And now when it comes together, you're the yesh, the understander, with the idea that has a shape and form. By comprehending it, it comes into a metziyus yesh, it becomes even more metziyus. Because now you have two yesh and met. The yesh has understood the yesh. That's a formidable combination, no? When a yesh understands a yesh. Okay. So yes, versteht er, yes, very nice. Had in the musik, the Joshua Besag, the Sog yes. Va bilti musik had eine beginnes metziyus dovor. And something that's not comprehensible is not a metziyus dovor. The mishum ze eine musik. That's why it's not comprehensible. It's a beautiful section here, no? And what's meant beyond. So, in other words, not understanding gives you a taste more of reality than understanding. But you have to understand that. You can't just say...
So you're going up a level.
There's no way to understand not understanding, really appreciate it without understanding first. You need a yesh to be mevatel, to appreciate ayin. Look who thinks he's nobody. That doesn't work.
No.
Yeah. First be a yesh before you become a nobody. First, like the Rebbe once told somebody who got drunk, put him... That was not what the Rebbe said. First you have to have yoda before you come to adil yoda. He can't adil yoda without yoda. Very nice. That's why it's not understandable. It mamish twists around the whole idea, because you talk to scientists, they'll say, if it's not understandable, it's not for me. Instead, you don't understand it. Because the reason it's not understandable because it's real. Because it's the real thing. Not that I don't yet understand it. It's fundamentally not understood. Yeah. And it affects bittul also in the musik. In other words, it doesn't only affect bittul in the understander. This is beautiful here. In other words, the bittul hayashir is not just that the person who's understanding realizes that there's more, but the idea remains. He's saying even the musik, even the idea itself, it also teaches you how it itself is also beyond, and not. So besides the individual, also the concept, the chefta is you appreciate how it's infinitely distant from the essence, the core. What we find from this is that comprehension is metziyus, is the substance and not the sublimation of the thing. And the non-comprehension, who be'etzem b'chinas bilti metziyus, is fundamentally a form of non-existence. Va'oid b'chinas bitl hadovor hamusik. And additionally, it's also the bitl hadovor hamusik. It shows you the bitl of it, how it's not hasn't any value, real value, compared to its source. So therefore, if so, is the opposite, is the diametric opposite of the existence, the substance of the faculty of the outer Binah. That's why, in truth, the outer dimension of Binah does not have the power of this deeper comprehension. In other words, mayvin, he's basically leading to come to say why you need the bracha, the same b'lebeinu bina. Why do you have to give in our heart bina? Everybody has bina. Because bina on its own, chitzeni is bina. I mean, I'm assuming that's what he's saying. Ein keicha, so you don't come to this. Why? Because its personality is comprehension and metziyus and substance. This power is in the level of the inner dimension of bina. And this is why it's called a mayvin dovor meteich dovor, that he understands something from something that it's not just an extension of the previous idea, that he's understanding a new comprehension. Even though it originates from the previous comprehension, it's a new appreciation, a new comprehension, a new understanding. An actual opposite of the previous understanding. And it comes specifically through the previous thought, idea. Wow. Because if you didn't have the comprehensible, it would not compel you to. You don't have it doesn't compel you to come to the non-comprehensible. So asagi is which compels and forces and brings us to the appreciation and the sense of beyond, that something is not murgish. Yeah, wow. This is still not over. He started the Nocha Peirik with Primis Binah as Hebzach Hershton. Wow. So all coming to explain Bli Gvul in Gvul.
Wow.
This is a story. In other words, you tell the story properly, and then they'll realize there's something beyond the story. You don't tell the story, you're not getting anywhere. And that's how I'm understanding. So you tell the story, words, and explain it, but then the real story says, oh, I realize now there's a whole other story.
It's like Ericksonian therapy.
Yeah, it's beautiful. It's very powerful. I like it a lot.
Wow.
Kitchen. Wow.
You
You always need a little silence to absorb. This is not as profound as some of the other prakim, but it's profound in a different way. I mean, it's not like you have to break your head with understanding that's the sefirot agnuzis. No, I think every one of us could take these ideas and probably explain it differently, relevant to us. You know, how asaga brings you to beyond asaga.
Yeah. How atzilus brings you to beyond atzilus.
See, with our Rebbe sitting thousands of hours writing pages just to do one thing, to break down the yesh without destroying it. That's the bottom line. Because to make it, the yesh itself should come to understand something beyond the yesh. Isn't that amazing? No, it's far easier just to break down the whole yesh and just destroy it. That's it. Tainusim segufim.
Those other branches of Chassidus.
Yeah. No, I understand. I'm just saying. Rabbi Rashab is busy trying to convince and persuade your yesh that to cooperate. Okay. Yeah, so the Rebbe do the same thing. Go on shlichus, will sein a yesh. But the bottom line, do what you got to do. Okay. Kitzer, just like we spoke Hashemayim, that the heavens reflect and reveal on an infinite power. The same thing, the 10 spheres reveal Ein Sof habligvul, infinite Ein Sof. We say same b'libeinu binah, given to our hearts binah, lahavin, which means to understand dovor meter dovor. So we're asking, give us in our hearts to understand one thing from the other. Binah hi hasaga v'tfisa b'kli. Binah means the comprehension and the grasping in a container. That's why it's called neshama. It's internal. Immanent. From comprehension we come to a comprehension that there's something that's not comprehensible. And that's the opposite, contrary to the original comprehension. The instinct, the skill, and the ability of comprehension is to find in everything the comprehensible, not the non-comprehensible. Like the difference between a motion and masik and the chorif maksha, the patient, deliberate one, and the sharp challenger. Gam hasogi hi yesh v'musik hu mugbul. And additionally, hasog is yesh. Comprehending is a yesh. It's a state of ownership and metziyus and existence. V'musik hu mugbul b'tziyur, and the concept is defined with a shape and form. And it comes into a substance. And something that's not comprehensible is not substantial. It's not right. It's not metziyus, and it's not in knowing and feeling the thing. And it causes an impact, affects bittul, sublimation in the idea. Maybe.
This type of thinking with in the more, but I did it until you said they're looking for something above it, and I don't see it when I'm learning imbue.
Okay, yeah, you could say that. And there it's Gonna's most say the Shabbatera. Yeah, especially some of the stuff that's very. Harishazei is chachus. So we see from this it's chachus because they're two opposites. So it's completely coming to a new type of understanding. And it comes from the comprehension. The ma'achash shamusay, because being that it's uncomprehended, it's only reflection. V'yesh habilti musig. Ha'ora. What's that? The ma'achash shamusay is ha'ora. Yesh. No, v'yesh. No. 1 second. V'achar shemusgar is ha'ara. V'yesh.
There is a built-in musar, who is previous binah.
Yesh built in this. There's the yesh. Okay, there is. That's the inner binah. One second. Important point. Why is he emphasizing his chachos? Because you remember the whole point. He said 10 spheres are Gilead Helam. They reveal. What do they reveal? Something not new. They reveal the hidden, let's say, the unconscious and the unconscious. The Mila is the hidden spheres, the reflection of the hidden spheres, and the essence. And here he wants to say that now it's revealing Bligvul. And remember, Bligvul compared to atzilus is chachos. So in other words, he's showing how Binah itself is leading you to a place that's outside, not just revealing its source, something beyond. That's the Bligvul. That's right, not just Gilead Helam. Because it's an opposite. Gilead Helam is not opposite. For example, very simple. It goes like this: Chesed of atzilus reveals to you that there's chesed within God in essence, but it doesn't reveal to you that it's not comprehensible. So that's Gilead Helam. That's not his chachos. But then chesed tells you, 1 second, there's something that's bligvul here. The bligvul is what put the chesed in place in the first place. Remember shir atzmi b'keir, that the bligvul. It's the edus in the kelim. Exactly. The kelim reveal more his chachos than the oir. Yeah, because the kelim is more yesh. So it leads you to a place of. So the oir will really lead you only to a place of. And the oir and the kelim will lead you to a place to realize that there's a bligvul here. That the artist is not limited to chesed gvura, and there's really an infinite element here. So you see the words his chachos is being used. You can see he's already explaining it in that type of aveda. Okay, we stop here. We did chapter 100, page 193 and 194.